Alright, hey guys, today we're going to be talking about Metal Gear Solid 5, The Phantom Pain. Very last Metal Gear game by Kojima. Konami will probably continue the series in some way or another, but this is the last game by the original creator. So, in this video I'm not going to be going over any spoilers. I'm just going to be talking about stuff that was either featured in the trailer or the official gameplay videos, so no spoilers, you don't have to worry about that. But I will be talking about my experience with the game so far. I'm probably about maybe 16 to 20 hours into the game, so I've got a good amount of time in it. And I must say, I was a little bit surprised at how the game plays. Like, the way it's advertised is pretty much advertised as a open world Metal Gear Solid game. So, you know what I was expecting? Like, oh, maybe like Metal Gear Solid 3 with some more open areas. You know, you infiltrate the individual compounds and do that. Well, what I found was actually quite a bit different than that. This game does not feel like any of the other Metal Gear games you've ever played. And not just gameplay-wise, but environment-wise, the way the story's shown, a lot of stuff. And at first, that really kind of made me kind of a little bit upset. I'm like, okay, this is a great game and all, a lot of detail is put into this, but it's not a Metal Gear game. Now, for those of you who don't follow Metal Gear, who haven't followed Metal Gear all the way, I'm going to give a brief little history on the series. There are two main protagonists, both named Snake. There's Solid Snake, and then there's Big Boss. And for the main games, there was the Metal Gear Solid games are all over the timeline. There was about 3 main games with Solid Snake in it. His beginning story in Metal Gear Solid, his interim story in Metal Gear Solid 2, and his ending story in Metal Gear Solid 4. And then for Big Boss, he's had his main game, which was Metal Gear Solid 3, his interim game, which was Peace Walker, and this is his final game in the series. Much like Solid Snake's was in Metal Gear Solid 4. There were 2 in-between games, which I consider in-between the timeline. Those were Metal Gear 1 and 2, the very first games that came out. They were ported to the NES, they were pretty old, and those are the games that feature both protagonists in it. Both Big Boss and Solid Snake are in both of those games. So, in Metal Gear Solid 4, we got the ending of Solid Snake's story. We got, basically, him coming to his conclusion, and the main problem most people had with that game, they said it was basically 2 story based. Like, the entire game was at least 40% cutscenes. Like, at least, in my opinion. Very heavily story, but I actually really enjoyed that. I really loved the story in Metal Gear Solid 4. I thought it was the best part of the game. I actually was like, some of the time I was playing a game, I was actually saying, okay, well, when can I find out more about these characters? This game seems to take the exact opposite approach. It's extremely focused on gameplay. Gameplay is a major focus, and the story tends to take a back seat. There are a lot of missions that have no real rhyme or reason behind them. Just, oh yeah, you need to do this mission, like blow up some tanks or whatever. And that's all of the mission. And while that may seem good, you may seem like, yeah, well, games are supposed to focus more on the game. But I mean, the series, Kojima himself has made it well known that he's a big film buff. He loves movies, he loves telling stories, he loves interesting characters. And Metal Gear has always been known for putting a lot of emphasis on those stories. And when you jump into a game like this, where it's like you get some story bits, and then there's like just 3 missions with no context, then you get more story bits. It's a little bit weird. You may think, well, that's how most games play out. Well, in Metal Gear games, for the most part, pretty much all the main ones, when you were doing pretty much anything in the game, it was always directly tied to the story. Every single place you infiltrate, directly connected to the story. Every place you go, how it's decorated, directly influenced by the story. Basically, everything's like tightly intertwined with the story itself. It makes it one nice, cohesive package. And especially in lots of the games, like Metal Gear 1 especially, it's extremely streamlined. There's like no wasted time in that game. You're never just, wandering around, doing whatever, just going from point A to point B. There's always a reason for you going. There's always like a rhyme and reason for everything. And that, again, is a polar opposite of what it's like in Metal Gear Solid 5. So, what is it? Is it just Kojima just, being lazy with story? Is it them just trying to focus more on gameplay? Well, I think it goes a little bit more into it than just that. Like, for instance, I was watching IGN's review, and they made a really good point. Yeah, IGN reviews, yeah. They made a really interesting point about how, in this game, it was they weren't too happy about the lack of the story elements, and how they kind of took a backseat to the games, which is a thing I had in my mind before I even watched their review. But one major thing they brought up was they thought it was really cool how, with the openness of the game, you can make your own story. And I thought that was a really, really interesting point. Because in this game, yeah, the main thing I was thinking was they're giving you too much freedom. If you just allow someone a wide open area and you don't tell them what's happening, you don't give context for anything, then sure, it kind of feels like it's useless, it's pointless, it has no real purpose or story. Why am I doing this? Who are these people? What connection do I have with them? But then I started thinking, maybe that's actually part of the story. Maybe the lack of story is part of the story. Now, no, don't think that I'm just one person who thinks, oh yeah, Kojima's the greatest man on the planet. He's like amazing. He's a master and everything. He's a really cool guy. I really appreciate his works, but he does make mistakes. So the way I'm thinking of this is, again, not thinking that he's just like a godlike person who can just do no wrong. I'm thinking that maybe the whole openness of the game and the open world elements are part of the narrative. The way I'll explain it is like this. The one thing I was talking to a friend about, and how there's a bunch of random missions in the game that are required for you to progress that are kind of pointless. Like, they'll send you out and say, go do this mission, take out these tanks, or go rescue these guys. Well, actually, you're being put in the same situation Snake is. Snake is our human protagonist. There's a big difference between Snake and Big Boss, which I'll go into in a second. But the main thing is, you're doing these missions that you don't want to have to do, right? So is Snake. In the plot, if he wants to rebuild his base, he's going to have to do jobs for money. And he probably doesn't want to do all these random jobs that are pointless because he's a soldier. It's like, he's not a mercenary. He's never really been for the mercenary life. He started his own military group, but it wasn't just for, making money. It's because he wanted to, fight his own wars. He didn't want to have someone else tell him what to do. So you could argue that the whole reason that you have to start out with all these pointless missions is because basically Kojima's putting you in the exact same situation Snake is, having to do a bunch of stuff he doesn't want to have to do. And again, yes, you could argue that making the player do something they want to do, blocking their fun, isn't a great way to have the game played. But let's go a little bit farther with that. I mean, yes, I would agree. You could make a game where the person's task is like, organizing papers. I would not want a 20-minute mini-game where I have to organize papers every single level. So no, that's not always a great excuse. Just saying, oh, well, the character's going through this, so you have to too. Alright, so a quick conversation about Big Boss versus Solid Snake. Big Boss is the more human character. Solid Snake is, I don't want to go into too much spoilers, but you already know this. Solid Snake is a clone of Big Boss. And because the time period when Metal Gear Solid 1 came out was a time period when American-style games were getting more popular and stuff. So as opposed to a Japanese-style story where you have a very tight character who has very specific traits and stuff, Solid Snake was basically a blank canvas. The player could project onto him whatever type of personality they wanted. He didn't have much say in anything that was happening. He didn't have much personality given to him. That's so the user could pretend they're Solid Snake. And again, in the contrast between the two series is Big Boss is his own character. He's a living, feeling person. He's someone that people can actually, relate to. He's relatable. And because of that, you couldn't really, emphasize. You couldn't really, pretend you were him. So, but again, it's because of times. People are now more acceptive of games where characters have their own distinct personality and stuff. It's not Mario. It's not like any of those other characters who are just, just like walking tropes or whatever. He actually feels like a real person. And because of that, lots of people started liking Big Boss more than Solid Snake, especially after Metal Gear Solid 3, when you find out way more about him. And it's kind of interesting because that's like another portrayal of the clone as the artificially created human, basically borderline biological robot. And because of that, he's a robot. He doesn't have any he doesn't really show much emotion. He doesn't really have much of a personality. He's essentially the robot character. And this is the character he's based off. This guy's a human being. He goes through a lot of stuff. So basically, he represents the human he was based off of. Now, you could say that Metal Gear Solid 4 hand-fed you the story. Yeah, it fed you a lot of story bits, and I guess you could portray that as you don't have really any control over what happens in that game because neither does Solid Snake. He doesn't really have control over anything. It's a lot about fate. It comes down to him having to do what he has to do because that's basically his job. He doesn't really have a say in anything. He doesn't have a choice, so neither do you. And again, going on with the contrast thing, in this game, he is a human being, so he has his own choices. He has his own personality. He's his own character. So now you take on the role of Big Boss and you make your own story. So again, that could be considered laziness. You could say well, just giving someone complete freedom and not actually putting much story into it is lazy. Yes, I completely agree. But in this context, it actually makes sense. If you think about it this way, this is Kojima's last game with Konami. This is his last Metal Gear game. So yes, he could have created a story about Big Boss going out for revenge, made it completely like the other games, and made it, just a game where you follow a story, you get some really interesting bits, some stuff that makes you think, and then it's over. And then that will be the last game, and it will be over. And he will just, you know, done exactly what he's been doing the whole time before. Crafting beautiful stories with interesting characters and very, very confusing plots and magic characters and stuff in it. But that would be just him continuing the line. That would just be another Metal Gear game. Instead, what he essentially did was he made a blank canvas out of our character who has his own established, you know, character. What he did was he gave us the ability to essentially make our own game. He gave us a wide open world to explore with. While still being structured in the story he's created, he gave us the chance to actually craft our own story. We choose what happens to a big boss in the story. We choose how he approaches missions. We choose how he gets in there. We basically design, we are part of the experience. We're crafting experience along with him. It's almost like if you had to help someone out with something. Sure, you could show them step by step how to do it, but at the end of the day, you have to leave. So you have to at least show them how to do stuff. They can do this stuff on their own. So, and in this game, this is the last game of Kojima. So it's essentially like him saying, okay, I'm not going to be here anymore, so here's what you need to have your own experiences. Since I can't craft any more experiences with you, here's exactly what you need to craft your own. So it's actually kind of really, really interesting if you think about it like that. Like, you're making your own experiences. It's not being created for you anymore. You're learning how to basically create your own story based on his design. So it's not just him spoon-feeding you a story like a Metal Gear Solid 4. You're actively taking part in it. And that's something you don't really get in games. Normally in games you get like 3 different types of things. You get the completely story-driven, where you just follow a story, you do some gameplay, you just interact with scenes, and you're just going through the motions. The second type of story is the multiple ending story, or sorry, the second type of story is the one where you get to make a few choices along the way. You know, you get some binary choices, kill this guy, let him live, or whatever, but at the end, it's still scripted. Everything you do is scripted, and you always come to a predefined outcome. And then the third type of story is, you know, the type of story where you go through the game, you make some choices, but in the end, it's just like one big choice or whatever. So you get just a few endings based on this game. So, but this type of game is different. This type of game, it's the first type of game where basically the choices are pre-made for you, but the in-between the choices is all up to you. You determine how Snake behaves. You determine how Snake acts. You determine a lot of how the story plays out. You determine what missions are going on. You determine how your base is developed. It's the freedom is not really occurs. Like, the first thing I was thinking about is, oh yeah, all this freedom is making it so we can't experience a Kojima game. We're not getting another Metal Gear. But in fact, we're actually getting something better. We're getting a hybrid experience. We're getting an experience that combines Kojima's storytelling with our own personal experiences. Like, for instance, in the other games, when you didn't have all this freedom, there was a really you could experience the missions in a few different ways. But in this game, you actually you have a wider variety of ways of experiencing the missions. This game gives you more replay value. You get more bang for your buck. You get a game that lasts longer and significantly longer than the other games. You actually get to basically craft your own story to a point. It's not just wide open where it's just like, yeah, do your own thing and do whatever, I don't care, I'm not going to work. It's basically you and Kojima making a story together. All those little side quests which completely feel pointless, it's just you becoming Snake, you taking on the role, and basically you crafting in between the lines. He's written the main story, you're writing the details of the chapters. So, if you think about it that way, it's actually a really, really interesting way of making the last game. Again, I've said a lot of nice things about it. I personally kind of would have preferred a more, streamlined game, but I can definitely see why it did it this way. I mean, again, this is just a theory. There's no real proof that he decided to make the game this way because of what I said. I could be completely wrong. Feel free to say in the comments why you think the game is like this. Personally, just thinking about it as an interactive story that you're doing together makes it a lot more interesting than just, oh yeah, Kojima just lazy or whatever. So, I mean, again, it could have been anything, but this is the way I'm choosing to think about it. I'm starting to enjoy the game a lot more, seeing how basically everything I do in the game is actually part of the story, not just busy work, or just, oh, well, sorry, Kojima ran out of story, so here's some missions for you to do in between. So again, just tell me what you think of the game so far. Just tell me why you think the game's like this and why it's so different from the other Metal Gear games. You heard my opinion, so I'd like to hear yours. Alright, I'll see you guys later. Bye.